Hey guys, this is the Betamax Man here. This video is going to be dedicated and specialized for a YouTube viewer of mine. Now, he has a Sony SL-HF360 Super Beta Hi-Fi VCR. He had a surface-mounted electrolytic capacitor that broke off of the circuit board, and he tried to solder another capacitor back on, and he cannot get it to attach. Now, there's a couple of things that you can do. This particular Capstain motor had an IC that I removed to fix another motor. So the IC on this one is missing. As you can see, this is where my thumb is where the IC was. I took that IC because I needed to fix another unit, but this is a good demonstration tool to use. Now what you see here is you'll see that I have replaced the surface-mounted electrolytics with just regular capacitors. Now, when you take off the surface capacitors, there are traces that have little solder pads. So the solder pads, all you want to do is add a little bit of solder on top of each of the pads, like I've done here, and you can tack in the leads, so you could reattach the leads from a regular capacitor. So you could do it this way and it works just fine. Now you can see the design. Now you see where this has a straight line, there's just a straight line, and then on the other side it's got a different type of shape to it. So where the straight line is, that's going to be your negative side, and over here is going to be your positive side. So if you don't have any pads left to solder to, what you'll have to do is you'll have to do what's called a solder bridge. Basically, you follow the traces back to its original origin, and you can solder to those to the traces. So basically, we're gonna pull the let's just pull this Capstain motor apart here. We're gonna pull the Capstain itself. We're just gonna take out for now, and you can see that you have these copper traces. Now on the photo that he gave me, the capacitor that's next to my thumb here, this is the capacitor where that come off, and he could not reattach a new one. Well, if you don't have any of the pads left, then you won't be able to do this type of repair. You'll have to do a bridge. Now, the traces from this actually go down to the coils. So there's not a whole heck of a lot you can really do other than put some solder onto the copper traces and solder your leads to there. So it's kind of this will be kind of a challenging thing to do, because you can actually scrape the coating off of the copper traces, and you can apply solder to the copper trace, and then you can get your leads to stick to that. You've got to be really good with a soldering iron, and if you just take like a flat-headed, like a standard screwdriver, and scrape the coating off of the copper trace, you can apply a little bit of solder, and you will need a very fine small tip, soldering tip. So find the smallest soldering tip that you have to do this with. But you can see the traces for this particular capacitor actually go down to the coils, and they actually go to this particular set of coils right here. Now with the SL-HF360s, they use the Capstain motor to thread the tape around the drum, and he was commenting on how the tape would not wrap around the drum. Well, if the Capstain motor is not working correctly, it will not thread the tape around the drum. So it does use the Capstain motor to thread around the head drum. Also uses the Capstain motor to drive the take-up and supply reels. So this particular design had a lot of issues, and Sony didn't use it for very long. They went back to their older way of doing it, where they had a direct drive motor, had a little pendulum gear that would swing back and forth to drive the take-up and supply reels. But for a few models they did use the 711 V3 chassis, had this particular system where the Capstain motor not only drove the Capstain, but it also drove the take-up and supply reels. So it not only uses it to thread the tape around the drum, it also uses it to move the tape inside the cassette. So the take-up reels and the supply reel, the take-up reel, it all rewind, play, fast forward is all done by the Capstain motor. The Capstain motor is doing two things. It's driving the Capstain, and it's driving the take-up and supply reels. But yeah, on this particular one, as you can see, you follow back those traces and they go to this particular coil right here by my finger here. So you can, in fact, peel away that coating and you'll expose the copper trace, and you can solder to that. You might want to use a very, like I said, you want to use a very fine soldering tip, and you have to be very good with the soldering iron to achieve this. So I will help you in any way that I can. And he was also commenting that he didn't even know that if fixing this capacitor problem was going to even fix his machine. Well, it may not. Here's something else that does happen. These surface mounted caps, they leak, and so they do damage the traces, but you will need to actually replace all the capacitors. I recommend replacing all three, because I guarantee you the reason why that other one fell off is because there was so much leakage and corrosion, and it just, over time, it just broke off. But you want to definitely remove the other two surface mounted caps and just put regular capacitors on there. You don't have to try and get the surface mounted caps. Just get regular capacitors and put a little solder on the little pads. There's little pads that you just, like you see here, I've got solder onto the pads, and then you connect the leads. And remember, if it's got a straight line, the solid straight line is going to be your negative, and the other side is going to be your positive. So this is what you will want to do. And I'm sorry I haven't been able to respond until tonight. I have not checked my emails in quite a long time. At least a week. So it's been about a week since I checked my email. So I apologize if I've caused you any inconvenience. But yes, with the SL-HF360s, they do wrap the tape around the drum. They drive the capstan, and they also drive the take-up and supply reels. So this operates the rewind, fast forward, and play. So if this is not working correctly, it can cause the tape not to wrap around the head drum. And I've had this problem, and sometimes it's not because of the capacitors. Sometimes it's because the IC actually fails and causes the motor to not work. Sometimes it can be the little Hall effect sensor on each of these little coils here. So that right there, this is the little Hall effect sensor right here in between the coils here. Sometimes they go bad, and you know, it's the type of repair that you may end up having to do here is going to be very tedious, and it's going to be a little challenging. So if you can't do this type of repair where you're putting a little solder on the pads, if there's no pads left to solder to, then you have no choice but to put solder onto the copper traces and attach your leads to the solder. So that is the only way that you can really do that kind of repair. But when you are removing the surface mounted caps, all you want to do is get your pliers, and needle nose pliers is what I like to use, and just give it a gentle twist, and they should snap right off, and you should have pads that you can put solder on too. So I hope this helps you. I hope you understand fully what's gotta happen in order to achieve having the capacitor put back on. But just use regular capacitors. That's the best way to do this. It's the best way to do this type of repair. I've replaced all 3 caps on this particular motor, and it restored it. But I wanted the IC off of it for some reason, and I took the IC off of it to fix another Capstain motor. But yeah, this design, I know that the SL-HF360, the SL-S600, some of the other ones like the S400s, there were a few models that use this particular design, and I call it the 711 B3-1 because there were the B3-2, which went back to the older style system where they had a direct drive motor with a pendulum gear that would swing back and forth to drive the take-up and supply rails. So they went back to that design because they found that that design was a little bit more reliable and it was less problematic. So this was a problematic thing, and that's why Sony did not keep that. But you'll see here that this is where the tooth belt goes around here. So the tooth belt goes onto here. And yeah, it does operate the play, fast forward, and rewind functions. And it also allows the tape to wrap around the head drum. Because if this doesn't turn, then it won't do that. So, yeah. I may have a Capstain motor for that machine. I'll look and see what I got. If I have a motor for it, all you would have to do is just pay shipping, and I'll ship it to you. But I don't know if I'm gonna have a motor for that particular machine. It doesn't mean that I won't get one maybe later on down the road. So if I don't have one now, maybe later on down the road I might have one and I can give it to you. So I hope this helped you, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.